Welcome to episode 12 of the Redeeming Productivity Show. In this episode, I'm joined by Adam Ford. Adam is the creator of the Babylon Bee. He's also the creator of the Adam Ford newsletter and his latest venture, Disrn News. In this interview, we talk about everything from the genesis of the Babylon Bee, the Christian's relationship to news and politics, and of course, about the tools, the techniques, and the mindset that Adam employs to bring glory to God while being productive in his work. Adam, thanks for joining us. How are you doing, man?
I'm pretty great, Reagan. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good now that I'm talking with you. So, Adam, people probably know you mostly from the Babylon Bee. You founded the Babylon Bee.
I did.
You also Adam Ford webcomics and
Yes.
the Christian Daily Reporter.
Yes.
And now your latest project, Discern News.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about yourself and about some of your projects.
About myself. Now that's quite an open-ended question.
Start with your childhood.
I'm just a Christian dude from Metro Detroit, where Mr. known as the home of Reagan Rose. Reagan and I, for the listeners who don't know, are friends. We're from the same area. Well, we weren't really that much of friends when you lived out here, but then you moved out west and went off on your grand adventure, and then we kind of became friends after you left. It was kind of a weird thing, but
Yeah, I was thinking about how much contact we had when I was out there, and
Yeah.
I thought about the spillover. That was probably the first time that I'd heard
Right.
your name. When we were working on the blog for the church.
the church blog, yes. Man, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so we go way back.
Yeah, you mentioned too, when we were getting ready for this, you mentioned Piper gifts. And I can't
Yes.
even, I may have totally forgotten about that. I hadn't thought about that in so long. And it made me happy to think about it and go back and look at some of the old Piper gifts.
I love those when they had the frames around them. And I think that was like one of the first things, you would know better than I do, but I think that was one of the first things before even you did the web comics. I remember seeing, I think I saw Chally share those way back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the webcomic was first. I actually, the idea came to me to make a bunch of GIFs of John Piper doing all his gesticulations, and I thought, well, that would probably be some good content marketing for my webcomic. So I made that, and I put a little ad for my webcomic, and that was one of the ways that I drove traffic to my comics. Way
all
long
part of the
time
plan.
ago.
All part of the plan.
Yes,
For you to
that was a
ascend
long
to
time
the
ago,
throne
man.
of internet greatness.
Yeah. So, man, what do you want to know about me?
The reason I wanted to have you on is because you are clearly a productive person, just in terms of what you have produced. I mean, you've gone multiple platforms, websites, and you've built them up from nothing. So maybe talk to us about that. Do you think of yourself, what do you like, if you were to categorize yourself, are you like a content creator, or are you like a serial entrepreneur, or, what do you, how do you think about yourself?
I'm just a sinner saved by grace.
Okay.
Just going to Jesus juke you real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm a
it's
content
true.
creator, I guess. I've had this awesome and kind of strange and unique sort of career as a content creator, where I'll do something for a while and then I'll move on to something different and do that, and then that's kind of what I've done. I started with the comics at adamford.com. I was creating all these Christian comics, and they got popular. You mentioned Tim Challies, my buddy. We met because of the comics. He was one of the first people to kind of give me some traffic when he linked to me from his a la carte section of his website long ago. And the comics became very popular, and Patreon was a new thing. I created a Patreon page, and a lot of people signed up to support me, and that's how I was able to quit my job of 9 years in sales and start creating content full time.
That had to be like a dream come true, right?
It was weird, man. I'll tell you that. It was great. Yeah. I don't know. It was quite a leap of faith. I think I took a 75% pay cut or something like that.
Wow.
It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't, it was the Patreon support was amazing, but it wasn't nearly enough to like fully support me and my family. So it was kind of a leap of faith. And, it's funny looking back on it. There's so many things that come to mind, but one of them is, I could have tried so hard to plan it out, and I had people email me and seriously blast me when I announced I was quitting my job to do comics full time.
Like strangers or people from
Oh
work?
yeah. Well, I mean, I've been getting hate mail and random email and stuff like that for so long now that I don't hardly even notice it anymore. But they, people were like, you're being a bad representation of a Christian. You're not being prudent. This is blind faith. You're going to, everything's going to go south and you're going to make Christians look bad type of thing. And I could have just wrung my hands planning about exactly what I was going to do, exactly how I was going to make it work. I could have done spreadsheet after spreadsheet and this and that. But the truth of it is that God had a plan, and I couldn't have known what it was because the Babylon Bee wasn't a thing yet. I didn't really know how I was going to pay my bills long term, and I didn't know a lot of things, but God had the Babylon Bee in the future, and that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, so you went full time just on the Adam Ford comics then.
That was in November 2014.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a long time. 5 years ago. My goodness.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. And I've always been a very productive, task oriented, like hard, crazy worker, overworker, possibly. I was that in sales as well. And after the first 2 or 3 months working from home, I was just kind of like in shock. Like I didn't know what to do. It just didn't seem right. It was like, what is going on? This is
no one's
weird.
telling me what to do at all.
This is very strange. I don't know. It didn't seem right, whatever. But yeah, now I've been working from home for a long time now, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition. I guess I did. When I first came to seminary, I worked from home full time in addition to school. That's how I made money. And my wife did too, actually. So I don't know why we took normal jobs. But I think, at least people I've heard from who listen to the podcast and who read the blog, a lot of them tend to be people who are more self-directed. They're either like entrepreneurial types or whatever. They work from home or whatever, or pastors, which is a really highly self-directed vocation. And I think people who do productivity stuff tend to be that because you kind of, if no one's forcing you to be productive, self-discipline either has to come from the outside or it's got to come from the inside. Like if someone's not disciplining you to do your job, then you got to discipline yourself. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah. That's a question I've gotten a lot, is the discipline question. Like, how do you stay disciplined? How do you maintain discipline? How do you stay productive when you're not accountable to a boss or whatever? And that's been, I never know really how to answer that because it's never been an issue for me ever before. And I think part of it is because I'm constantly doing what like I love to do. So I love it. I mean, I love it. I work all the time, and then if I have free time and I can partake in a hobby, I would like to work. That's what I like to do, so it's never been an issue for me. Like I drag myself to the computer, and I mean, for the most part, I absolutely love what I do, and I can't wait to get up every day and do it.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And
that's been the case with the comics. That was the case with the Babylon Bee. That was the case with Christian Daily Reporter. That's the case with Disrn right now in my newsletter. It's called the Adam Ford Newsletter. I've been focusing on that quite a bit. Put a few hours into that every day as well, and I've been enjoying it a lot.
I'm surprised how much you're able to turn out. I subscribe to all the newsletters and stuff, and I can't believe even after since you've launched Discern, like you're still keeping Christian Daily Reporter updated. Like, and that's mostly you, right? It like. I know that you have writers for Discern, but that's like all you, the Christian Daily Reporter and the newsletters, right?
Yes. And so here's going to be a Redeeming Productivity World exclusive. Christian Daily Reporter is, in short order, going to be going the way of the buffalo.
Really?
Yep. It's going to get, the thing is that Discern, especially if you put my newsletter alongside of it, it's everything that CDR is, but times about 10. So it's all the stories that would be on CDR. It's got the links to the the other sources that you'd find on CDR, but it also has a nice summary there for you, so you don't have to click through most of the time.
It makes sense.
Yeah, and then I can see that it's, and I figured this was going to happen, that it's sort of cannibalizing. Discern is cannibalizing traffic from CDR because most of the links on CDR anymore point to Discern. So that's
totally.
Yeah, so it's cool. It's fine. And
was that always part of the plan when you launched CDR? Did you think I'm going to do a news outlet eventually?
No. See, that's the thing. That's what I mean. Like I'm not anti-planning. I plan stuff, but you never know what God's going to do. You never know what God's going to do.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that Seth and I, the guy that bought the Babylon Bee from me, we became good friends, and he just flew up here. This is how Discern was born, and we spent a day together, and we just plotted. We just plotted what we could do next, And awesome. He's my partner on Discern, and he's my business partner, and yeah, Discern was born. And so we wanted to do something that, and for the listeners, it's DISRN. That's how you spell Discern. DISRN,
right?
Yeah, .com. DISRN. Yeah, so we wanted to do a news aggregation website that has nice, brief, succinct summaries of all the stories, that is newsletter centric and podcast centric. So this is rolling out in phases. We're just over a month old now. The website is 4 weeks ago we launched. It's going very well. It's surpassing all of our expectations. And my newsletter is going very well. We've got another newsletter that's just basically a collection of all the stories for the last 24 hours that were published on the site. And we're going to have some more newsletters coming. There's a really sharp guy that writes for Discern named Peter Heck. He's got a newsletter that we're going to start pushing. And next phase is going to be the podcast. So I'm going to have a regular podcast. Peter's going to have a regular podcast, and we're going to recruit a couple more folks to be named later that are going to have regular podcasts, all under the Discern banner.
That's really cool.
So
that's
I'm looking
exciting,
forward to
man.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And people are, the feedback has been really, really phenomenal so far. People are very happy and excited to have someone who thinks like them and believes things that they believe. This is where the name Discern came from. I'm plowing through, hundreds of articles a day, and not just me, but other people as well. And we're distilling it down to just what people like us want to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love it.
The good stuff, the bad stuff, the heavy stuff, the just interesting stuff, the happy stories, because there's so much consequential and heavy stuff that goes on every day that we sprinkle in some lighthearted stuff, and we just put it all together, man.
I love it. Well, I've really been enjoying it. I subscribed since it started to the newsletter, and I read it every day. And
thank you.
Yeah, I wrote an article a while back called how to keep up with the news without going down the rabbit hole. And I feel like that's in that article I linked back then to CDR, but that's exactly what I appreciate about it. And I think what even more so what Discern accomplishes is there's too much. There's too much
so
out there.
much, man.
And
so much.
I can't remember how I put it in the article, but basically I want someone I trust to pre-filter it for me and give me the stuff that's important. And I can go deeper if I want to, but
that's exactly
I don't
it.
have the time. So
that is exactly, you just described what Discern does. That's what you just described.
You chew my food like a mother bird, and then you vomit it into my mouth. Thank you for that.
Yeah, our motto is brief, smart, faithful. So it's short, but it's dense, and it's faithful. The news stories that we write, the hard news, is very objective. It's not opinion news. We have opinion pieces, but the news it's very objective. It's just reporting the facts. But the stories that we report on are things that, generally speaking, Christians and conservatives are concerned about, want to know about. That's what we do.
Well, you guys are doing great so far. I'm excited for the podcast to launch too.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a great little team at Discern too. We've got a great little team of writers.
Adam, probably the thing people know you most for is the Babylon Bee. And I don't know if I mentioned this before or if this is already on the recording, but you did a podcast with them. It came out, I think, last week, or maybe that was this week. Yeah, I'll link to that. It's a really good interview. So I won't spend a ton of time on Babylon Bee, but I want to ask you a few questions about it because that is your baby. How did you come up with the idea for it?
Well, I like I explained on the B podcast, which by the way, that was my first podcast ever. This is not, I've never done this before. This is my second podcast ever here with Mr. Reagan Rose. I've always been, this sort of thing's always made me very uncomfortable, but lately I've been more willing to venture out of my comfort zone and do stuff like this. So, um, what was the question?
How'd you come up with the
Oh,
Babylon
right.
Bee?
Yeah. So that was an idea. I have lots of ideas. I'm an ideas guy, and most of them come in and then they go away after a while.
Yeah.
And that was just one of the ideas that it just wouldn't let go. It wouldn't go away. So I just eventually had to acquiesce and say, okay, all right, I'm going to do it. And the desire to create the Babylon Bee came a lot of the reason I wanted to do that is because watching some of the late night news satire, the talk show guys, Jon Stewart and all them, and
Hmm.
watching The Onion, especially back in the Obama years, especially when massive societal change was happening during those years, talking about the Obergefell case, same-sex marriage becoming
Yeah.
legalized, all that's crazy stuff that happened during Obama's reign, and how they just spoke into it, and it was so effective. The Onion would run these stories, man, and they would just go viral, and
Yeah.
they were so effective at reinforcing the progressive point of view on any situation, and they were funny. And comedy is so disarming. You can't. It's hard to. There's not much of a comeback to a really good joke. You
Yeah,
just kind of
totally.
have to take it on the chin. And so I would see this and I'm like, man, we need something like that. We need something like that. That joke right there. I wish I could remember some of them, but I can't. The only one that I can remember is I don't remember the exact headline, but there was this Onion story about the Supreme Court justices who dissented on Obergefell, suddenly realizing they were going to be um, the antagonists in the future Emmy award-winning film or something like that. It was brutal, but it was like
Yeah, yeah.
it was right on.
Hmm.
As far as it was wrong, but it was very effective
Yeah, they
and
cut right with the satire. They cut right to the heart of
just
the
brutal.
issue without having to like explain anything at all. You just instantly get it, and
Yep.
you kind of sneak it under the door too with a show.
Yeah, and if you're on the other side, it's just a punch to the gut, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, man, we need something like that. And so it just wouldn't go away. And the more I researched it, the more I thought, man, I can do that. And so I recruited just this little team of unpaid people that were just excited about the idea,
Hmm.
and populated the site with 15 or 20 articles. And we launched on March 1st, 2016. And yeah, it
Yeah, it seems like
blew
forever
up.
ago.
Yeah, I know. It absolutely blew up.
Yeah, I remember
I,
getting like a one sentence email from you that said, "What do you think about a Christian satire website?" That's all it
really?
said with a question mark. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy, man, how it blew up. It's there were over 1 million visitors the first month, and that was
It's
the
crazy.
lowest month ever.
That's just wild.
I know, and it was totally organic as well. We never advertised, we never marketed. It was totally organic, all the growth. And now I sold it a little over a year ago. I still own a small part of it, but the guy I sold the majority of it to, his name is Seth Dillon. He's become my good friend, and the guy who was my head writer, Kyle Mann, is now the editor in chief, running the show over there, and they've hired a couple other guys on. And the Bee is doing better than ever by any standard you could probably want to look at.
Hey, what made you decide to sell it? Did Seth approach you, or were you shopping around,
Yeah,
or how'd that go down?
he did. After it blew up, that was a regular thing to get unsolicited messages and emails of people wanting to buy it or wanting to invest in it or whatever. And I never wanted to for the first little while, and then eventually, I just was ready to. That thing I was saying earlier. It had been a couple years, and I was just ready for the next thing. And there were there was obviously in a decision that big, there are a lot of factors involved. I was, I was part of it was I was working so much. It required so much of me, and I laugh because now with Discern, I know I'm working more now. So I'm not sure how that's happened, but there was this constant anxiety about getting, we had multiple beefs with Facebook and these other social media overlords about trying to shut us down and all this, and we're very heavily dependent on Facebook for traffic. So it was this constant source of anxiety. Like, am I going to wake up tomorrow and they're going to shoot me, and then that's going to be the end of the story. That was pretty terrible. And then there was I'm trying to work on this, but historically speaking, let's say, I've been a bit of a control freak, and especially on something like that, because it was, like you said, it was like my baby. I wanted my hands on everything. It was very hard for me to delegate things, and so because of that, I came to realize, like, I'm probably hindering its growth, because I saw it. The response to the bee was just unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I knew that we were just scratching the surface. But you can only grow so much with basically two guys running the show, me and Kyle, and with me having to put my hands on everything. And we needed someone who was going to take some risks and who was going to hire some people and who was going to put some resources behind it. And that's exactly what Seth did. And it's paid off.
And the thing you moved to was from doing satire of the news to doing real news, which, the irony isn't
it was
lost
natural
on many people. Yeah.
Yeah, it was natural. After about a year, maybe not even that long, publishing, lots of stories every day on the Bee, you kind of run out of some of the low-hanging fruit church culture jokes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the further we went along, the more necessary it was for me to stay deeply informed on the day's news and events.
Makes sense.
Because that's the stuff we would be riffing on, whatever was happening in politics, whatever the major news of the day was. So I was in the news all day, every day. And so it was a pretty natural transition to reporting real news, because, in a sense, that's kind of what the Bee does. It reports real news just in a satirical way. So I was already in the news. I was already digesting all this. I was already picking out the things that were important and were not important. And I thought, and then after selling the Bee, I wanted to do something that was more a passion project, a thing, my own little playground on the internet. That's what Christian Daily Reporter is.
And you weren't, and you're not dependent on anybody when you launched that, right?
And that was amazing.
The newsletter dependent. You didn't care about I know you were saying you weren't even doing social media with that initially.
No social media, no nothing. Yeah. No, the response was amazing as well. It's just, I didn't even have ads on the site, so it wasn't monetized. It was just it was a hobby. But like all of my work hobbies, I took it very seriously, and I worked full time on it all the time. And almost 100% of the traffic was direct traffic.
That's so awesome.
Which is crazy. People intentionally going to that website, like, not because it was on their Facebook feed or whatever.
Well, that's what's crazy. I think people who don't work in doing stuff with content, they don't realize, like, the internet, if you think about what your actual habits are, you realize it. But back in the day, people would say, make sure you bookmark our website.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many bookmarks do people use? Like,
right.
You were dependent on Facebook or Twitter or email newsletters most of the time to actually drive us to these things. I don't go and check a website. How many websites do people check? So it really is, in this day and age, remarkable. And I had it as my homepage. I still do.
Oh,
Christian
thank
Daily
you.
Reporter is my homepage.
Dude.
That was probably the first time I changed my homepage in a decade from, like,
we'll change it over to Discern now.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah, no, it was great. So all the things you just said, when you come to realize that people are just passively allowing basically Facebook or Google to determine what they're reading every day and what they're informed on and all that. And then imagine yourself running the Babylon Bee, where a great majority of your traffic was coming from Facebook, and you start to see, like, wow, we are utterly dependent on them for the flow of information in our society, and it can become a very alarming thing.
Mm-hmm. Especially when their agenda starts to become more clear.
Yeah, put all that together, and yeah,
it's
rough. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question just about news in general, right?
Yeah.
Some believers, other people I've talked to in the past will say things like, well, we shouldn't bother with the news as Christians,
Yeah.
especially now that politics are like so heated right now in this
Yeah.
country. People say, let's just stay out of it. Let's just, I don't even need to keep up on any of it.
Yeah.
But you are very much keeping up on it and involved in it, and you're providing a service that in part is for believers. So
Yep.
why should Christians care about the news?
Well, that's a good question. I wish you would have fed me these questions beforehand so I could have come up with a really witty answer. This is all off the cuff, people, just for the record.
And for the record, I did send him the questions, but he was quote unquote too busy to read them.
I was too busy redeeming productivity. So, yes, people should care about the news because I don't see anything virtuous about being willfully ignorant of what's happening in the world. And sometimes people ask the question, like, not the news in general, but they more refer to politics. Like, should Christians be involved with politics? And I mentioned this on the B podcast that anymore in our society, politics is entertainment. Politics, there's never been a time, I've read numerous things on this. There's never been a time that so many people have been so involved and care so much about politics. It's kind of a new thing, kind of the Trump era sort of ushered it in, I suppose. And like I mentioned on the B podcast, that the Mohler testimony drew more viewers than the Game of Thrones show finale, which was like one of the most popular shows in the world. And I thought that was a nice
crazy
little it's the new entertainment. Everyone is paying attention. So I guess the question is, should Christians be involved in politics? Should Christians be involved in anything? And if the answer to that is yes, then politics should be up there at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And the more I've read and the more I've learned about the worldviews behind different political camps, the more I've learned about the differences between conservatism and collectivism, between liberty and tyranny, the more I'm convinced, just utterly convinced that being involved in espousing political beliefs or fighting for, say, against abortion, being involved in pro-life things, being involved in, all this stuff in the news right now, man, about, this little 7-year-old James, whose mom is trying to turn him into a girl, all this crazy stuff. But this is being involved in this kind of stuff is in effect a way of loving your neighbor. So we're here to glorify God. We're here to love God. We're here to love our neighbor. One of the things I realized some time ago, I'm sorry if I'm going off on tangents here. That's kind of just what I do. Plus, I just had a cup of coffee. One of the things I realized recently is that if you're going to dedicate your life to something, if I'm going to try to have a mission statement or an MO, what am I doing? What things should I keep focused in front of me? Well, I'm here to love God, glorify God, enjoy him forever. I'm here to love my neighbor. I'm here. And how do I love my neighbor? I'm here to try to reduce the suffering of my neighbor. I'm here to try to increase the quality of life of my neighbor, right? And if you look at two things that have been responsible for more suffering and death in the entire story of humankind, possibly than anything else, it depends on how you'd want to define things. I would say that would be abortion, and you might just call it collectivism. And under the umbrella of collectivism, you've got, of course, communism, which is one of the most horrific things that sinful human heart has ever concocted in our history. So what I'm trying to say here is, for everybody listening, preach the gospel, fight abortion, fight collectivism. The end.
You need to get one of those Hobby Lobby type signs, like a live, laugh, love one, but says that. You can put it over your mantle.
Yeah. Yeah. So the point of what I was just trying to get across was that being in politics just for the sake of being in politics and trying to, wanting to flame people on Twitter or whatever, that's kind of dumb. If you're in politics because you love God, if you're in politics because you love God and you love your neighbor, and you generally care about people's quality of life and you generally care about human flourishing, that's an entirely different thing.
That's such a great point. It's such a great point. The motivations for what we do can make all the difference in the world between something being a worthless pursuit or a virtuous pursuit.
Yes.
Why are you doing it? Are you doing all things for the glory of God? Are you thinking about the way in which you're operating?
Yes.
Or are you just going to work to make a paycheck? You just kind of, just try to stay out of stuff online so, that aunt you don't care about doesn't get mad at you.
Right. You're right. You're right. And it's just don't mindlessly do things, So I'm not a conservative because I want to listen to Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh so that I can, or Ben Shapiro, so that I can get the best way to own the libs, so that I can get lots of followers online. That's stupid and worthless. There's nothing there. What's the point of that? But if I say, just to pick one thing, look around and I see this system called capitalism that's responsible for more responsible for human flourishing than anything else ever, and I see it juxtaposed against socialism / communism / collectivism and state tyranny and social welfare and state control and all of this stuff that's responsible for massive human suffering. I have a vested interest, because I love my neighbor. I have a vested interest in trying to promote the system that is responsible for massive human flourishing. Why wouldn't I do that if I love my neighbor, right?
Absolutely.
There we go.
I think that, you've got the whole question of every political agenda, whatever it is driven by some sort of worldview. They have an understanding of what man is like, what our purpose on the planet is for.
You're going to go Al Mohler on me with this worldview now.
In a Genesis 3 world.
I'm Albert Mohler.
But who's going to speak to it? Who has the answers, the authoritative answers about what mankind is really like? If it's not Christians speaking into that and explaining what the world is like and countering wrong philosophies that undergird so many political ideologies. I mean, how much bad political ideology has been driven by the fact that people assume that mankind is good, and if you just leave him alone, he's gonna end up flourishing and doing all the right stuff. You don't need the law. You don't need any sort of incentivization to make people work.
Sure.
All of those things Scripture speaks to. So if Christians aren't talking about it, where are people going to hear the answers? It's not going to be the right answers.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm happy that people like you have a podcast. And that's why I want to start a podcast. And that's why I'm grateful for people like, Al Mohler or whomever who speak about these sort of things, because you're exactly right. Who's better to speak into that sort of stuff than a Christian who's submitted to the Word of God and who knows about the reality of absolute truth? I mean, look around at the world right now, Reagan. This subjective sort of postmodern fairy tale, ethereal, nothing's really true or real is. I mean, I just mentioned earlier a 7-year-old whose mother is trying to turn him into a girl. I mean, this is reality now. This is reality now. It's not like this freakish thing.
Site anymore.
What's that?
You don't even need to run your satire site anymore.
Dude, I know. I legitimately get people asking me, like, is Disrn satire or is it real? People legitimately ask me that. So, but there's never been a better time that I know of for Christians to stand up for the truth and to just speak plainly, lovingly, but plainly, and say, no, this is insane.
Absolutely.
There is truth. There is such thing as absolute truth. God does exist. There is right and wrong. There is evil. There is all these things that we know to be true. And so many people know it to be true. People are just afraid to say it.
That's exactly right. But these things, like, you think you're never going to change anyone's mind. That's what people say. Well, what's the point? I'm never going to change anyone's mind. Well, people's minds are changed. It is true. Especially the more voices who speak up.
Yes.
And you think about some of the big changes that have happened in our society, they happen because of a vocal minority. Not,
Yes,
the zeitgeist doesn't just move on its own. There's people who decide to start speaking. So why don't we speak too?
exactly. Yeah, just an example of that is, what's the percentage of, what is it, a half of a percent? It's a very, very small percentage of people that identify as transgender, but it kind of runs policy now. You know what I'm saying? Talk about a
Yeah.
vocal minority.
Yeah, it's the
And
tail
to your
wagging the dog. It's
right, and to
wild.
your point about people being afraid to speak up, one thing I've noticed is that, and I'm not, I might sometimes come off as a bit confrontational in my writing and stuff. I'm not terribly confrontational in real life. I don't go around yelling about my beliefs and stuff like that when I'm coaching my kids' baseball team, but when I meet people, I realize, some years ago I heard, I don't even know, it was just some random YouTube rabbit hole or something like that. I heard Andrew Breitbart say before he died, he said something like, why are conservatives so afraid to speak up? There's more of us than there are of them. And
Yeah.
I don't know why that just stuck in my head. And now that I've been in politics and I just start talking to people, this guy that I coach baseball with, my doctor, this other guy, you meet all these people who are conservatives and who are Christians. Like, you never, but people are so
Yeah.
afraid
They keep
to,
it to themselves.
yeah, right. You never know. And I said to this guy, he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a conservative. I listen to this and blah blah blah. Tell me about your website." I'm like, "Man, I never would have guessed you were a conservative." Which, how ignorant of me. Why would I have? I just assume, you just assume that people aren't Christians, people aren't conservatives because, well, I think it's partly because of the offensive against us, which has
Yeah.
been saying that we're evil and bad and bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, blah 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 phobic. That you're afraid to say something because people are going to immediately be hostile towards you. Yeah.
I appreciate what you do because
Thanks.
it's important. It is
Thank
important
you.
work.
Man, I just get to rambling when we start talking about this
It's
stuff. This is why I
fun.
need a podcast. I need to
Yeah.
just be able to flip on a mic and just start rambling.
Well, it's good stuff. Let's transition here. Let's get back on like specific productivity type stuff.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you some questions about like what your week even looks like. So like what's a typical week? Do you work 5 days a week? Do you try to like keep normal hours or
Okay.
yeah.
No, I don't try to keep normal hours. Uh, I need to preface this with a disclaimer that it's kind of funny that I'm on the Redeeming Productivity podcast right now, and I'm probably expected to talk about a healthy work-life balance and this sort of stuff. I just launched a news outlet, and so I'm in this season of life right now. And I knew I would be. It was in the plan where I literally work all the time. So I knew that there was going to be, for a matter of months after we launched Discern, I was literally not going to be doing much else but working. And so right now that's where I am. Do not emulate my daily routine at this point, because right now I'm working, with the exception of church and meals occasionally, and then, go out to eat with the family or whatever. I'm working, basically from the time I wake up until nearly the time I go to bed. And that's because there's so much involved in running a news outlet, especially right after launch, especially when you're trying to establish a voice and establish yourself out there in the market, that there's just always so many things that need to be done. I'm constantly behind. So right now my week is lots and lots and lots of work. I wake up very early. I get some Bible in, and then I just dive in, man.
Yeah, I imagine each next task is kind of just obvious for you because you got so many. You just
It's
grab something and
basically
dig
just
in.
close my eyes and pluck one out of the crowd.
Yeah, go fish strategy.
Yeah.
Uh, Back when you were doing like the bee and stuff, did you ever slip into like a normal routine anyway,
Yeah.
or was it pretty
Yeah.
chaotic too?
So it was pretty busy as well, but my normal routine, and this is what I'll be working towards with Discern, is, I've always been a very early riser. So when I'm in productivity mode, I'm up between 4 and 5 every day. And I like to, the morning time is my most productive time, especially that time before anyone else is awake. I get a lot done in the first couple hours before any of the kids are up or anything like that. And in my normal routine, I'll take a little break at some point to go for a run. or maybe just a walk around the neighborhood or something like that. Something to get the computer out of my face for
Mm-hmm.
half an hour, reboot my brain. And generally speaking, normally I'm usually done by about 5:30, so that I
That's
can, help out the wife with the kids and
yeah.
eat dinner and do whatever evenings. We're very busy in the summertime, my family. We've got baseball and wrestling and all this stuff. I've got 3 sons, 10, 8, and 6. So we stay pretty busy.
We were talking about this, I think, before we started recording, but we were talking about like seasons of life where
Yeah.
you have like kind of not a very good work-life balance.
Yes.
And I remember when I started seminary, I remember talking with Kim, that's my wife, and saying, "Hey, the next 3 years, it's just going to be brutal,
Yep.
and we're gonna have to work it out, and we're gonna have to fit stuff in, and like working with her kind of with a plan for like what do you need to feel loved by me,
Yeah.
knowing that
The bare minimum.
yeah, what's the minimum to maintain our
Yes.
marriage?"
Yes. That's pretty much it.
Did you have those conversations? Like what?
Yeah. I had that conversation with Chelsea. Yeah. My wife. And before we launched Discern, I was just doing CDR, and I was I'm a work guy, man. I like to have my nose down. I like to be working. I like to be productive. It's in my DNA. It's just
Mhm.
what I do. It's my thing. Um, but for that time I was running CDR just kind of as a passion project. I was pretty, I was working all day, every day, obviously, but I was, I'd go out to lunch with the wife. We'd go, a couple of vacations over the summer. We'd go up north, whatever. I'm coaching baseball. I'm doing all this other stuff. But coming up to the launch of Discern, which, you know, preparing to launch was nearly a year-long process. So we knew it was coming. I basically told her, yeah, it's going to be. I asked her, I'm like, this is going to be okay, right? This is what it's going to take. It's going to be a few months where it's just going to be nonstop. And God bless her, she is a wonderful woman. She said, go for it.
Praise God for great wives, right?
Definitely. Wow. That is a major manifestation of the grace of God, is a loving wife.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what about generally, even now, like you've got all these different tasks you need to do, you got all
Yeah.
this stuff, different dates, launches, all that, lots of
Yeah.
information. What kind of tools do you use to stay organized? Like where do you use Evernote? Do you use like any kind of task manager type thing?
Yeah. Well, I'm really into Trello these days. Do you know Trello?
Yeah, I love Trello.
So that was something that Seth introduced me to, and we used it when I was still at the B, doing stuff daily. And so we use it now for Discern, for our article workflow. So we're all in there, and that's where articles get assigned and get go through their various stages before they get published and all that stuff. And I started using Trello for personal stuff, to-do lists. I like the mobile app too. It's pretty nice.
It's
But
really slick. We used that at GTY to plan this
yeah.
conference we just had, and that
Oh,
was
really?
the first big project I did with
I didn't hear
Trello.
anything notable come out of that conference. Was there
Yeah, it was pretty
anything
quiet.
newsworthy?
Nope.
No.
Pretty subdued.
So you pretty much all just went to the conference, and then you decided to go home?
Mm-hmm. Yep, nothing happened.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Go home. So we're all in Slack. We use Slack also, which I like. I don't know if that's a productivity tool, but Slack's not bad. And then honestly, I'm pretty old school after that. I've got my big paper calendar on my office wall that I keep a lot of. It says Reagan podcast 3 p.m. really big on it right there,
Nice.
so I didn't forget about you. I've got you ever seen what movie was that? I don't remember the movie, and never mind. Forget about that reference. But I've got these big monitors. I've got all this. I'm surrounded by screens, and I've got lots of pads of paper, and I've got this really advanced system of reminders. Which what I do is I scribble it down on this piece of paper, not even in any sort of organized manner or even all facing the same direction. And if it needs to be done, it's circled. And then once I do it, it gets scribbled out.
We could call that the chaos method of productivity.
Yeah, it's the Adam Ford method.
The Adam Ford method. Hey,
Yes.
you got to patent that and publish a book.
Yeah. So I'm looking at right now all these things that I need to get done that I'm behind on.
Yeah, and I'm just making you blab on here while you need to get real work done.
Yeah. So I think every single productivity expert on the planet would shun me for this, but I use my email inbox as a to-do list as well. We use this email program called Front. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
It's pretty great. Seth turned me onto that as well, and I basically all my 795 email addresses, as well as DMs from my different pages and all this stuff, it all gets funneled to the same inbox. And so it's just all right there.
Oh, that's super cool. It sounds like I need to have Seth on here. That's what it sounds like.
You should, man. Hey, hit him up. He'd be fun.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell him he needs to do like a weekly podcast for Disrn, like for business leaders or something.
Yeah,
Christian
totally.
business leaders.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Disrn, we've talked about productivity, we've talked about the B and everything in between. What's next? You've got the podcasts coming out.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of expectation for when the first one's going to launch?
No.
Eventually.
I was hoping it would be relatively soon compared to now. I was hoping it'd be within a month or a month and a half of launching Disrn, but I'm far busier than I imagined I would be. And until I can find a way to delegate some of these things that I'm doing every day, let me rephrase that. I'm going to have to find a way to delegate some of the stuff I'm doing every day. And once I do that and we get a new system going, that's a little less of me being hands-on with everything, then the next thing on the docket is going to be the podcast. And I was hoping for daily, I think it's going to be a daily podcast, but at the very least, it'll be a regular podcast. I would think at the very least 3 times a week.
Oh,
and it's going to be talking about news and events of the day, sort of like my newsletter. But we're just going to chop it up, man. Whatever people are talking about, I'm going to blab and rant like I've been doing to you.
I love it. Yeah, I know that you frequently refer to yourself as the evangelical Ben Shapiro. A little bit, I don't know.
I've actually heard people call me that. You called me that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
No,
yeah.
I've never.
No, I'm pretty sure
record,
you said it. I think you said it.
No. I have never. Reagan, go home. I have never referred to myself as that before. For the record.
Well, I'm going to refer to you as that from now on.
Jeez.
Yeah.
No, he's the Jewish Adam Ford.
Yes, that's better. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, much humbler.
Yeah. So what's next for me is Disrn is we hit the ground running, but we still got polishing to do. I've still got numerous plans for Disrn that we haven't been able to implement yet because I've been too busy. So there's new things. There are several new things that are going to be rolling out for Disrn. And other than that, I'd say in about 5 minutes, my kids are going to come home from school and be really loud. And so if you hear that, that's what that is.
I love it. Hey, we talked about it. A lot of the different ways people can stay in touch, sign up for the newsletters. I'll link to all of those. But what's the one thing, if people are listening to this, they want to keep up what's going on with Disrn or with Adam Ford?
Yeah.
What's the one thing they should sign up for?
The Adam Ford newsletter. And you can do that at adamfordnewsletter.com. And
that's FORD, right?
Correct. I take the 5 or 6 or 8 most pressing news stories of the previous 24 hours. It gets sent Monday through Friday. I provide a brief summary with links. And for most of the items, I analyze and opine, and I sprinkle it with humor and emojis and a little bit of irreverence and put it all together. And what you end up with is an email that you get every day around the middle of the day. Well, I can't say that because there's people all over the world that get it. Lots of people have signed up for it. It's going really well. You get an email. It gives you a breakdown of exactly what you need to know if you're concerned about the type of stuff that you and I are concerned about. The heavy, the not so heavy, the tragic, the interesting, the funny, along with my little analysis. And people are finding it very valuable. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. I'm trying to keep a focus on that as well as on the website. And especially going into the election cycle and all of this stuff, I think it's going to be a very, very valuable resource for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a ton of fun. Like I mentioned earlier, if you guys should listen to this, I read it every single day, 5 minutes. I actually usually don't actually click through to the stories, but it just kind of keeps your finger on the pulse. It's a lot of fun. Really good stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you coming on the show. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it very much. And the website again is discern.com. That's disrn.com.
Well, that's all for this episode. Don't forget to check out this week on the blog, How to Master Any Subject by Making It Interesting. It's been a really popular one this week, so if you haven't read it, head on over to redeemingproductivity.com and check it out. And just a brief personal note as we close. I've been running Redeeming Productivity for a while now, and there are costs associated with hosting a website and with hosting a podcast too. Not to mention the software and the equipment that's required to record and edit these episodes. And that is not even bringing into the matter the massive time commitment that it takes to make these. And hear me out, and by no means am I complaining. I love it, and I want to keep doing this. And several folks have asked me recently if there was any way to help support the work of Redeeming Productivity. And until recently, I've always had to say, no, not really. I just appreciate you reading or listening. But this week, under duress, I finally decided to launch a Patreon page. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's really this simple platform that connects creators with people who want to support their work. So on my Patreon page, you'll find a few options for supporting Redeeming Productivity with a small donation each month. In exchange for that, it will give you access to my private stream, which is basically just a place where you'll be the first to hear about upcoming projects. And eventually, I'm going to try to start to create special things just for my Patreon supporters. But it's brand new. Nobody, as of this recording, has signed up yet, so you can be the first. So if you're even a tiny bit interested in helping me to continue to provide content related to Christian productivity, then please check out my Patreon page. It's at patreon.com/redeemingprod, P-R-O-D, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes below. Appreciate you thinking about it. And I will catch you next week on the Redeeming Productivity Show. And until then, remember, whatever you do, do it well and do it all